Hello, my name's Melinda Cooper. Some of you may know me as Mindy Cooper. Now, for the last 35 years, I've been working in women's health physiotherapy, continence and pelvic health down under in Australia, in Melbourne, Victoria. It's my pleasure to have accepted the invitation from Nellie and Carolyn of Pelvic Health Solutions to come to Canada in January and share with you the Lactating Breast course for physiotherapists. So why would a physiotherapist be interested in lactation in the first place? Well, as a women's health physiotherapist, it kind of makes sense. Lactation is an important part of the mammalian reproductive system. It is no less important than conception, pregnancy, labour and birth. And if physiotherapists are already in that space, then they need to be aware of the biological norm of lactation for women and breastfeeding for babies. There are tangible clinical relevancies of an understanding of lactation and breastfeeding. In 2014, an excellent study appeared in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology by our Norwegian colleagues. Now, this study looked at pregnancy-related pelvic girdle pain in women for 18 months. So it was a longitudinal study from birth through to 18 months. Now, this study concluded that women who were breastfeeding had a protective effect against persistent pelvic girdle pain. Not only was the effect demonstrated statistically, but it was found to be so strong that the authors concluded that if women have pelvic girdle pain, breastfeeding must, under as many circumstances as possible, be completely encouraged. It could almost be considered as a treatment. It has such a powerful protective effect. And when we consider that 1 in 10 women with pelvic girdle pain can have severe consequences up to 11 years later, then we need to be in this space, not just helping with the symptoms and the musculoskeletal ramifications of pelvic girdle pain, but to be doing what we can to secure these women's breastfeeding journey. Now, for physiotherapists who are working in the field of continence, it's interesting to note from the research that women who are actively breastfeeding their very young babies in their postpartum period are less likely to have urinary tract infections compared with women who are using formula or non-human milks to feed their babies. That's important. We also know that children who were breastfed as babies are less likely to have nocturnal enuresis compared with children who were formula fed or non-human milk fed. Now, if you're interested or you have clinical experience in working in the field of female pelvic pain, then again we have a responsibility, if you like, to be aware of the impacts of lactation and breastfeeding on these women. Now, as we know, women with pelvic pain, very many of them have had a history of sexual abuse or sexual assault. There have been some very recent studies done that have shown that women with a history of sexual assault are equally as likely to initiate breastfeeding at the birth of their babies and are also equally likely to want to breastfeeding their babies or have an intention to breastfeed as women who don't have a history of sexual assault. More recent studies by Professor Kathleen Kendall-Tackett in the United States Kathleen has studied the sleep patterns of women and their babies over in that first year postpartum, and she's found, and this is in a very large cohort, there were almost 1,000 women, I think it was 964 women in her cohort who had been sexually abused or with a history of sexual assault. And these almost 1,000 women, of those in that study group, those who were breastfeeding their babies had better sleep patterns than the women who had experienced sexual assault but did not breastfeed their babies. Kathleen goes on to describe that this is very likely a physiological effect whereby lactation attenuates the chronic stress response that occurs in women who've had these histories. Now, as those of us who work in pelvic pain know, this chronic stress response is a significant driver of the persistence of pain. So not only do we need a quiver full of quills to help women with their management of their pelvic pain, but a knowledge and understanding of the positive impacts that lactation and breastfeeding has on women with these histories and symptoms is part of our responsibility. So even if you're not actively treating women with breastfeeding difficulties, being in the space that actively supports them is part of our physiotherapy responsibility. Now, physiotherapists who are generalists and working in musculoskeletal health and orthopaedics may also be very interested in understanding this. Certainly what's happening in Australia is many women are presenting to orthopaedic and musculoskeletal therapists requesting therapeutic ultrasound for their mastitic symptoms. So the consumer is seeking therapy. Certainly chiropractors and osteopaths where I live in Melbourne, and I know in the United States, are offering these services. So we really do need, as physiotherapists, to be equivalently informed and be in this space. What we'll be doing in our course is looking at the research and the evidence that underpins the therapeutic modalities that I will be wanting us to learn and to roll out for our clients. So we'll be looking at the electrical physical agents of therapeutic ultrasound, low-level laser therapy. We'll be looking at manual techniques such as massage and using whole breast manual lymphatic and fascial movements for women with inflammatory disorders. We'll also be looking at handling of the breast tissue for milk expression and pumping. And I am also now wanting to introduce, unfortunately they can't be with me at the moment, but two of my dear friends and colleagues, Hilary Schwanzer, an expatriate Canadian who runs the Informed Physiotherapy and Pilates practice, which I now work at. So I'm delighted that Hilary is coming back to Canada to share some of the teaching with me, and so is Kim Veal. And I'm hoping, and I'm absolutely confident that you will enjoy their offerings, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in January. Many thanks. And as we say down under, see you later.